In this Blender tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can make a rendering with a cube, a backdrop, and a couple lights. When you start Blender, you get a cube as your default object. If I click on it, I can press G, then Z, then 1, and then move it up to the top level of the grid right here. Then I can press Shift A or go to the Add menu here and add a new mesh. I'm going to add a plane. Notice that the plane is underneath the cube. If you look at the top right, I can change the visibility of the cube by clicking on this eyeball icon. Then I'm in object mode of the plane. If I press Tab on my keyboard, notice on the left-hand side of the screen, I'm now in edit mode. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Currently, I'm in vertex edit mode. If I press Control B or Command B, this will bevel, but it's not beveling anything because I have a vertex selected. If I just click once, my bevel command will end up down at the bottom. I can click this triangle to open up the bevel options. Instead of edges, I want to select vertices. Instead of one segment, I want to increase this to maybe 12 segments. Then for the width, I can click on my mouse and drag it till it's an appropriate width. I'm making a backdrop, so this is a nice curve right here. And that's it. Now I can click another vertice, or I can switch to edges. Up in the top left, I'm going to switch to edges right here. And now I'm going to click all of these edges. Holding Shift, I'll click the edges in the back. Once I have all the edges selected, I'll press E to extrude. Notice that it moves all in different directions. I want it to move straight up. So if I tap the Z key for zebra, I'll only move in the Z direction. Then I can click. Now I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to select all of the edges in the bottom here. So now I have all of these edges selected and I'm going to press Command or Control B once again. This time I will click and I'll go to the options for my bevel command. Notice here I'm going to change the width. So I can move the width until I have something appropriate. I have this nice smooth curve here now. Then I can switch off the bevel command and press Tab to go back to object mode. Now I'm going to right click and shade smooth. Now I have a nice looking backdrop, but remember it's the size of the cube. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, then I'm going to press S and I'm going to scale this up. Now it's much larger. I'm going to go back and change the visibility of the cube by pressing the eyeball. Now I have my cube on a photo backdrop. This is my light that comes in on the default scene. You can see it in the collection over here, and I have a camera. If I want to see how my light is affecting my scene, I can change that. So up here at the top, I can look at a wireframe, I can look at the standard shading, or I can look at the rendered view. Now, if I press G and I move my light around, you can see that it changes the scene. I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate my light and move another one over here. Now I have two lights in my scene. To adjust the scale of the brightness of the lights, click on the light, then go down to the light bulb on the lower right. We can change the color of the lights, so I can make one green, and I can change its power rating. So usually we need a lot more power as we move the lights away from the scene. Then if I click this light, I can change its color to something like purple. And I have a pretty dramatic scene. Sometimes it can be difficult to see where you're moving lights and objects. So up at the top menu of Blender, where this thing that looks like a bow and arrow, I can click this, and then I can click the default move gizmo. That way, when I click objects, I have the default move gizmo. If you're coming from other software such as Maya, this may feel more natural to you. So here, if I click this light, I can move with this blue square here, and now I'm moving in the X and Y plane, and I can move my light. Notice as I move the light farther away, it gets less powerful. So that means you need to increase the value of the light. Also, it'll get more diffuse as you move it farther away. Now we need to look through our camera. This is our camera, but we need to compose our scene. So to do that, I'm going to go to View, Cameras, Active Camera. So now I'm looking through the camera, but if I move, I'm going to stop looking through the camera. So up here by the X, Y, and Z navigation, there's a small arrow. I can press N on my keyboard or click this arrow. Then under View, I'm going to lock the camera to the view, this option right here. Now, if I move around, I'm actually moving the camera and composing a shot. Now, to get out of this menu, I need to go back to View, Cameras, Active Camera. So now I can move around, and as you can see, I've positioned my camera right here. Next, we need to pick our render engine. I can either use the default render engine of Eevee, but if I click this camera over on the right, I can select Cycles. So on Cycles, we can go ahead and change the render settings a little bit so we can have the max samples be lower. We can also make sure if your device uses GPU compute that you're using GPU compute. This will make it much faster. We'll talk more about settings in Cycles later, but this is good enough for right now. Then if I want to render one of these images, I click Render, then Render Image, and it'll render the image in Cycles. Then once the render image is done, I can click on Image, and then I can save my image. There's much more we can do, but this is a basic way to get an object, have some lights, and actually render it in Blender. Happy 3D modeling!